Have you ever thought about the more mundane things in your life? Boring, everyday objects? Your fridge, your kettle, your toaster, your lunch. Okay, maybe I'm just hungry, but Control is a game that's all about what if the mundane were perhaps not quite so mundane. And do you know what the most mundane thing possible is? That's right, working in an office. Now, you might be wondering why I'm dressed as a lower middle level administrator in an office. It's because I am a lower middle level administrator in an office. Yay! But also because Control takes place in the Federal Bureau of Control, which is a specialized secret government branch all focused on investigating the non-mundane. It's here that we find our protagonist, Jesse Faden, who, within moments of stepping through the door, is rapidly promoted to director of the entire bureau, as apparently it is just that easy to get a promotion. Could have fooled me. This is an office, just like any office you may have previously worked in. Yeah, that's probably fine. Except, well, naturally, everything has gone slightly wrong. You see, within the Bureau, things aren't quite as they seem. The area and location twists and turns and warps around you. So one time you might open a door and, well, it reveals a humble corridor. The next time you open it, it might reveal, well, something else entirely. One of the greatest parts of Control is just how atmospheric it is. Everything is inherently weird and slightly unsettling that you constantly feel on edge at first, jumping with a mild panic at just the simple announcement of a new area. Horrifying. It's the constant offset of a normal office setting. Sure, it's markedly large and brutalist, but otherwise filled with desks and shelves and areas where some poor clerk had to run the post around. All of this is starkly contrasted against the twisted figures of the Hiss, this parasitical, mysterious entity that has turned and twisted the denizens of the oldest house into screaming and angry creatures. Control pulls you through the game with its innate sense of weirdness and intrigue. You're never really sure what you can trust or who you can trust, such as the various NPCs you meet who all have this unpleasant grin plastered across their faces in a way that you're never entirely sure if it's on purpose or just the latest foray into the uncanny valley. Or the Board, who's this weird inverted dark pyramid that only seems to talk to you through dial tone. Every moment the world bends in front of you, every moment the non-Euclidean geometry of the oldest house unfurls in front of you, and every time the game revels in the stark contrast of the brutalist grey concrete and the alien red glow that precedes any Hiss incident, is the game going from strength to strength. Remedy continually make weird and eerie games that are constant love letters to Twin Peaks, and Control is no different. Every step forward through the game is another step towards something new and interesting, and forever keeps you guessing as to what could be real and what is just an alteration of the world around you. Hey look, a gun! You see, Control
is a video game, which means, by law, it has to have combat in it. Which also means that, by law, the combat has to be focused around guns. And goodness, does Control have a lot of guns?
You wield the service weapon, which takes the idea of handing in your badge and gun to a whole new level. Specifically the administrative level, because evil other dimensional entities are invading and you're not exactly going to talk them to death. Instead, you've got your trusty gun to blast them to ribbons. It comes in various shapes and sizes and effects, as do, well, all the enemies you'll be facing. Admittedly, the enemies tend to also mainly focus on the gunfight aspect, which is useful because I guess they didn't really get the memo that they're other dimensional magical beings, so they forgot to pick up their psychic powers along the way.
You, yes you, however, will be developing all manner of psychic abilities. And these are what managed to save Control's entire combat system.
You see, Control's combat scenarios are scrappy, and that's great. You're always moving around as enemies spawn hither and thither, darting and dashing through a room as you're firing off shots from your gun, but also throwing rocks, chairs, and who knows what else at any enemy you can get your third eye on. It's thanks to this scrappy combat system that means the combat never fully wears out its welcome. You're not cowering behind cover in slow and drawn out gunfights, you're sprinting through a hail of bullets, lifting the rocks up as your own shield before smashing an entire enemy back at another. As you develop more and more abilities, you'll find yourself constantly using this full arsenal of skills, and the chaotic explosions of the combat continue in something that creates some incredibly visually impressive scenes.
The combination of this strange setting and chaotic combat creates an interesting rhythm where one moment you're exploring and trying to find out some deep secret mystery, and then the next, before you know it, papers are flying, desks are scattering, your favorite mug is exploding, as combat just takes off and everything has gone wrong. Control is, well, not perfect. The issue being right now is, well, I'm not really qualified to explain all the issues. not on my meagre salary, no. So I've enlisted the help of a specialist who has sent us a helpful video to explain everything that's wrong. That was the wrong video. That was the wrong video.
While we're on the topic of combat, the enemies are borderline boring, monotonously mundane. At first, as you come across new types of foes, you'll wriggle in your seat as some twisted figure approaches for the first time. But all too rapidly, the types of enemies run dry and you'll find yourself facing off against the same handful of foes. And most of those are just people with guns. Except this time they have an ominous glow to them. This extends to a number of the boss fights where the big bad you're facing, it's just a regular bad, but now bigger, by which I mean it's got a bigger health bar, which I don't think is what big bad is meant to mean. The game does its best to shake up what types of enemies you face with which type of other enemies, but there does come a point where some areas are just plainly combat zones and it rapidly unravels the world around you into just combat zones. There's a point where you go to an area that feels straight off of some alien planet. Dark crystalline rocks protrude towards a mysterious starry sky in the basement of the building. And for what should be this weird and illusionary area, it's just a big combat zone where you do a big fight and then you leave.
this dissonance can, well, extend further and further into the game. Because you see, some of Control's strongest moments are when you're wandering the halls of the Bureau, basically going from room to room of desks and paper stacks and memos that some poor aide has helped to deal with, and lacquered wood of offices against the harsh concrete of the architecture. But then, from these wonderful moments of the weird and offset office, you will then find yourself surrounded by industrial piping and a military complex, and oh no, it's just every video game ever. Control does struggle fighting between creating a world of weird science and suspicious atmosphere and, well, being a video game where you shoot things. Interacting and hunting down these objects of power, these mundane objects with supernatural powers, that's Control at its strength. They often include the world shifting and warping, and Control's strongest moments are fully where things aren't quite as they should be. But these moments are sometimes surprisingly rare. Control presents a world full of mysteries and conundrums. With so many oddities going on, you need to try and find out what is happening, and more importantly, why is happening. While the NPCs will sit down and explain to you the various things with the sort of cavalier attitude you'd expect when you work in a place where your mug could break your neck at a moment's notice, a lot of the world building is done through various emails and interdepartmental correspondence you'll be picking up, and some of these are interesting and continue to be atmospherically redacted. But if I wanted to spend all day reading every work email I picked up, I'd go to my actual job, where I have to read work emails. Both instill equal amounts of dread in me. There is also the incredible acting that comes with Dr. Darling, who has kindly left a number of video recordings throughout the Bureau, and it's things like this that cement the strange air this game constantly tries to give you. There are times where Control feels a little at odds with itself. You see, it'll be trying to be super spooky and creepy and weird and intriguing, but at the same time immediately demand you be whisked off to the other side of the map to go deal with a combat thing that it's just generated for you, where you just shoot a lot of guns. Control is a wonderfully intriguing game with combat that never necessarily outstays its welcome, thankfully due to it being just so energetic. Even if that combat does eventually hit a dead end in development and, well, never really progresses any further around about halfway through. And yet, one of the biggest sadnesses for me in Control is that, well, for all the mysteries and characters and riddles, it never actually builds to anything. You see, near the end of the game, everything is suddenly building and coming together, new aspects over and over again, all the pieces falling together, and feeling like they're building to something greater than you or I could ever be. And then it just kind of ends and falls apart. Because you see, some of those really cryptic moments were just that, needlessly cryptic moments. Some of the great mysteries that you're hoping to have extrapolated and finally have a sense of clarity on don't have that. And instead, you're just left wondering if you really understood any of it, or if there was anything to ever be understood to begin with. Hello, and thank you for watching my video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to... Sorry about that. Anyway, this was a video about Control. It was a video game that was fairly good. The Ashtray Maze, that is prime Control. Everything else wishes it were that. What can you do? Anyway, if you have thoughts, why don't you let me, the good Chris. Otherwise, you can click on this video here, which will be about a board game called Scythe.
Doesn't have anything to do with Control, but it does have robots in it. Or there's one down here, which is, I guess, about a video game called Monster Hunter Rise. The only monsters I deal with are those in big business. Otherwise, you can click on, I don't know, a face, and then you can subscribe. Look at this face. Ugh. Ugh. Anyway, thank you and goodbye.